My documentary uses forms and conventions of real media products in many different ways. Firstly, I've chosen to do a mixed-style documentary in the form of both an expository and observational form. This is because many informative documentaries such as my own use this style in order to give the voice of God narration. I feel that it gives a more personal account of situations because you can overlay the voiceover on top of the footage. I've also used a lot of handheld camera work for the observational style, which makes it feel less staged and more realistic. Due to my documentary being about dementia, I've followed the forms and conventions by airing it at 9 p.m. after Watershed, similarly to other Channel 4 documentaries. Other aspects which I have chosen to include in my documentary to conform to the codes and conventions are that I have begun the narrative with a voiceover which relates to what is being shown on screen. For example, the voiceover mentions facts about dementia connoting that anyone could contract the illness, and the footage corresponding with the voiceover is busy streets of a city with many people walking by, demonstrating that any one of these people could have the illness. Busy streets and outside views also happen to be a coding convention. And also for my voiceover, I decided to use my own voice because when I was researching, I found that documentaries of a sensitive nature usually have a female voice representing a softer side. This happens in Katie, My Beautiful Face. One of the documentaries I deconstructed was Katie, My Beautiful Face. I have also followed documentary form by introducing the character or the person and then having the documentary titles appear. The voiceover is usually known to sum up the main person story in the first minute of the documentary. Small Teen Big World is a good example of this, and I have taken inspiration from it in the sense that I summed up Arthur Pittman and his family's story in the first minute of the documentary.
At the age of 84, he is fighting a losing battle against vascular dementia.
After my titles, I take inspiration from all of the documentaries which I deconstructed, especially Seven Dwarfs because they show home life in such a dramatic way. Another way that I followed the codes and conventions was filming regular home footage and presenting it in a way that the voiceover could say something interesting about. For example, I showed my mum putting on my granddad's shoes as the voiceover talks about his caregivers, which then leads to the interview of my nan, who is his main caregiver. Therefore, I followed by linking all of my footage to the interviews so that it flowed easily and linked together. From my deconstructions, I found that documentaries use a wide range of angles and camera angles for shots. For example, in Small Teen Big World, they use many high angles, and I have used this aspect in my own documentary. In the kitchen scene at the beginning of my documentary and one of the outside garden shots, I've tried to incorporate the high angles. And I've used this, similarly to this, I've also used a low angle, which is predominantly seen in the documentary series Seven Dwarfs. In my own documentary, I have included the low angle at the beginning as the voiceover describes who Arthur is and about his condition. The low angle represents a sort of heroic nature as the camera looks up to him. Wide shots are also highly used, and I have demonstrated this with an outdoor shot. Profile shots are also used very regularly, especially in Terry Pratchett Choosing to Die. So I have included one in my own to conform to the idea. It also shows a different side to the person and makes it feel more natural as the people aren't always facing the camera. One of the most known conventions of documentaries is the use of establishing shots. I've included this in my own to represent the setting of the interviews taking place and to provide a sense of familiarity. I have also accompanied my voiceover with a non-diegetic music track in the background which conforms to the codes and conventions of documentaries. It is parallel to the footage being shown, therefore I chose a slow, quiet piece of music called Sleepy Eyes which creates ambience. For my interviews, I have followed the codes and conventions by filming them in medium shot with the eye line 1/3 of the way down the screen and following the rule of thirds. My interviewees are centered to the right or left with the background out of focus. For my interviews, I have varied the side which each person sits for variety in order to mix it up and make it appear more interesting. I also made sure that they didn't look directly into the camera For my interviews, I've also included titles, which are in a rounded rectangular shape, which is transparent with the interviewee's name and relation to the main person character on it. Other ways in which I followed the coding conventions are by using archive footage to demonstrate the past. I have used it over the top of interviews as part of my cutaways where reference to the past is spoken about. For instance, when my brother talks about my granddad being in the RAF, archive footage of him is shown from that time era.
He's always talking about how he was in the RAF and how independent he was and really proud, but now he's just as proud, but he's not really, doesn't know what he's proud of. I guess that's the biggest thing.
The archive footage also moves on screen, either by zooming in and out or across the screen. I have used oral bridges at the beginning and ending of interviews to make the documentary flow more and so that the voice is more recognisable.
I have to take the taxi from here, and I prefer to have somebody to come with me.
At the beginning of my documentary, the voiceover speaks about facts about dementia, such as how many people have the illness, and a convention of documentaries is that facts will appear on the screen as text when they're being spoken about. Often this is done via split screen, or they will just overlay the footage much like in Super Size vs Super Skinny. In my own, I decided to opt for split screen. Ways in which I have challenged the forms and conventions of real media products is from my titles. Quite often when documentaries show their pre-title sequence, the voiceover will then say the name of the documentary. I decided not to do this and instead just use text on screen. I decided this because I wanted the image to take main attention to the audience. I wanted the audience's attention to be solely on the photo and not a distracting voice which would break up the focus. Therefore, by having the name of the documentary appear via text floating out from the screen, I feel as though it appears more seamless, more calm and more fitting to my own style of documentary.
Arthur Pittman is one of those people.
A coding convention of documentaries is natural lighting and natural sound. I have had to go against this coding convention and challenge it slightly as part of final touches to my final product. In some scenes I have changed the brightness and contrast of the footage, despite it being natural outside light. This is so that there isn't such a huge difference when it cuts from a dark inside shot to a very bright outside shot. I've also adjusted a lot of my sound in Adobe Sound Booth with the equalizer tool to get rid of any unwanted whistles and cracks from the tripod and microphone. A big coding convention of documentaries is the use of zooms rather than cuts. Originally I did have a zoom at the beginning of my documentary, but I just deleted it as it didn't look very smooth. For my newspaper advert, I have followed coding conventions by including one main key image which draws people's attention and sets a sort of background for the newspaper advert as well as representing the documentary as a whole. My key image represents my documentary as it shows a man who is distressed and vulnerable, and due to him being sat on a chair, it shows he is confined to spaces and not able to do as he pleases anymore. Another coding convention which I have followed is having the Channel 4 logo in the centre on the right hand side of the page. The next key item on newspaper adverts is a text box with the name of the documentary within it and the date and time that is being aired. From my research I found that the writing is always white with a rectangular box under it, so that the white writing stood out. This is where one of the final coding conventions comes in. The fact that the colour of the Channel 4 logo and the box behind the writing and an aspect from the main focus image are all the same. For my own, as my granddad is wearing a khaki jumper in the photo, I decided to make the Channel 4 logo and the box khaki so that they all tie in together. This makes sure that it doesn't look messy, as having too many different colours creates a jumbled look, and instead it just seems as though they all fit together on the page. I've also used the same font for the writing on the newspaper advert, which I have for the documentary. It's called Bell MT, so that they all fit together and it's obvious that they're all part as one. Ways in which I have developed the forms and conventions of newspaper adverts is by including a web address in the bottom right hand corner of my own. From my research, only some newspaper adverts have them due to reasons I couldn't find out, but I think it is because some shows don't actually have or need one. But I have used one in my own because I feel that due to the serious nature and sensitive nature of my documentary, a website would be helpful for those who would watch it and need some advice afterwards. I have challenged the forms and conventions of the newspaper advert because on all newspaper adverts that I have deconstructed and analysed, the text box with the scheduled date and time and name of the documentary is always in the bottom left-hand corner of the page. However, I placed mine in the top left corner. I did this because my image was very bottom heavy and took up a lot of space in the bottom of the page, leaving lots of room at the top, so I thought that by placing it there, the spacing of everything on the page would look more even and as though they were separate items. Another reason that I placed it there is that the box is khaki and therefore it would have been placed over the top of a khaki jumper and it wouldn't have stood out so much and to give the same effect. Despite the fact that here I have challenged the forms and conventions, I still feel that it works just as well with great impact. For my radio trailer, I have conformed to the forms and conventions of radio trailers by including the title of my documentary as well as the scheduling, so the date and time at the end of the radio trailer so that it stays in the audience's mind.
Lost in Time, Living with Dementia, Wednesday, 18th of January, 9 p.m.
The very last thing which the voiceover on my radio trailer says is Channel 4. This is a code and convention of radio trailers, as if you say the channel last, it sticks clearly in the audience's mind and is very important for advertisement purposes. Also, if you forget any other details of the documentaries, such as the name or the date that it's being aired, you can easily find them out again if you know what channel it's from.
Channel 4.
My radio trailer lasts about 36 seconds and most radio trailers last between 30 and 40 seconds, so I have conformed to the codes and conventions in this way. Radio trailers include music beds under the voiceover, so it is non-diegetic, and I have used the same track I used for my documentary, so it's called Sleepy Eyes, to ensure that they all link together. I have conformed to the codes and conventions of real media products for my radio trailer, in including main snippets from my documentary which will entice the audience to want to watch it. I have used a male voiceover for the radio trailer so that it is more powerful and clearer to understand and tells the narrative of the documentary.
Where is he then?
There he is.
I'm here. Now he's just as proud, but he's not really, doesn't know what he's proud of, I guess. That's the biggest thing.
I feel that overall I have met the conditions of the brief well and used my research early on from documentaries in a well-achieved manner and have correctly applied the codes and conventions that I have found out to my own documentary. The pacing and timing of the documentary is very smooth because having the conventional music track in the background helps to keep it at a steady level throughout. I feel that I have used the codes and conventions to make it fit into a specific genre and target audience by adjusting interview length and title fonts. Overall, I am very happy with my use of codes and conventions and feel that it looks like a real documentary. However, if I was to do anything again regarding my planning and content and the use of codes and conventions, then it would be to get more footage documenting the life of the person being interviewed, so that I had more cutaways over the top of the interviews.